Chuck, let me catch you up on airplanes.
Okay, please. I'm not flying right now because, airline prices are through the roof.
Okay, that's a different reason why some other people don't fly.
Yes.
Because it's just a little spooked. So the things that have happened slowly that you just might not have noticed. But I've paid close attention to this, and I want to share some of it with you.
All right.
The wings are also fuel tanks.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's why if a plane hits something that breaks out the wing, flames
it blows
everywhere.
up. Yeah.
When people imagine fuel inside an airplane, they might imagine a giant metal tank somewhere underneath the passengers. Like there's your suitcase, then there's somebody's dog, and then right beside it, there is a giant barrel of jet fuel. But on many large airplanes, a lot of the fuel is actually stored inside the wings. And I don't really mean that they take a separate fuel tank and then they shove it inside the wing. The inside of the wing itself is sealed so that parts of the wing become the tank. Because why carry two containers when the wing is already hollow, right? So that saves space, and more importantly, it saves weight. And weight is a huge deal on an airplane because every extra kilogram has to be lifted into the sky. So lifting more weight needs more fuel, but then that extra fuel also has weight. So you end up needing even more fuel to carry the fuel. So it becomes this annoying little cycle. But there's another reason as well as to why the fuel is stored in the wings. While the airplane is flying, the wings are being pushed upward by the air. The body of the airplane is so heavy, so the middle is actually being pulled downward while the wings are being pushed up. So that means that the wings are actually bending. Put some fuel weight inside the wings, and that weight pulls the wings downward a little bit. It actually helps reduce some of that bending. So the fuel is not only being stored there, its location can help the structure. And the plane also has to control which fuel it uses first, because if it uses too much fuel from one side, the plane could actually become heavier on the other side. Or if too much weight moves toward the front or back, the aircraft becomes much harder to balance. So there are pumps and valves moving and feeding fuel in a very planned order. So the fuel is not just sitting there doing nothing. It's actually part of the airplane's weight and balance system. And yes, fuel can make a crash fire much worse. But damaging a wing does not really mean that the airplane automatically explodes like it does in action movies. Okay, you still need the fuel to escape, mix with air, and then find something hot enough to ignite it.
Up in first class, on long haul flights, they're lay flat seats.
I wouldn't know.
No, that was an appeal for a raise, people. Do you know the word to tessellate?
To tessellate, I've heard it.
Yes, it's a fun word.
It's a fun word.
All right, so here it is. If you're going to tile a floor,
right,
and your tiles are square, then that's easy. You just lay it out.
Right.
But suppose you have a different shape. Suppose you have the shape of like a penguin, and that's your tile. How do you tile that? Well, you can design the penguin shape so that they can fit opposite each other.
Okay.
Okay? And then they blend in and everybody still fits.
Okay.
That's tessellating.
That's tessellating.
When you tessellate, you take a shape and have it work its way into another identical shape, but on a different side, and then you can still cover the floor.
All right.
Okay? So in first class lay flat, you're tessellated to maximize how many they can put in while still preserving
the lay flat.
The lay flat and a little bit of your privacy.
Now this is a very good example of something that engineers and designers do constantly. You're actually trying to fit as much as possible onto a very limited amount of space without making the final product look terrible. Okay. Now a normal upright seat doesn't really take up that much floor space. But if you want that seat to turn into a bed, now you need enough room for an entire human being to lie down. And airlines obviously don't want to give each passenger a full bedroom. So what they do instead is that they start overlapping the spaces. Your feet might slide underneath the side table of the passenger in front of you. One seat might face slightly inward, another might face slightly outward, right? So the airplane is actually asking, how do we give this person a bed, privacy, a table, some storage space, and access to the aisle while still fitting and putting enough people inside the plane to make money. But the problem is that they can't really fit seats anywhere that they like because people still need to get out during an emergency. Okay, the aisles have to remain clear so that people can pass by. And yes, first class may look very luxurious, but behind the luxury, somebody was basically playing the world's most expensive Tetris. Now, another fact is that even adding one extra premium seat can actually make a major financial difference for an airline over thousands of flights. That is why airlines invest very heavily in very small improvements in the cabin layout.
Door is not an ordinary door. You might have noticed that.
Well, I fly Frontier, so it's a screen door.
So the door is designed to close from the inside out, not from the outside in. Okay? Yes, when you board, the door is sitting outside the plane.
Right.
However, when they close it, it comes inside the plane and then recloses against it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I'm very happy it does that.
Let me tell you why. Okay? Because at 35,000 feet, there's hardly any air pressure outside.
Right. So what you're doing is using the pressure of the cabin to push against the door,
Keeping it
closed.
Correct.
Now, many passenger doors are actually designed so that before they can open outward, they first have to move slightly inward or move through a very specific path. But when the plane is actually very high in the sky, the pressure inside the cabin is much greater than the pressure outside of it, right? So the air inside is pushing the door outward against its frame. And this is not a tiny force, by the way. The door has a very large surface area. So even though the pressure on each little square inch may not really sound enormous, but once you add it across the entire door, you can have several tons of pressure and force being applied on it. So basically, the higher pressure inside is helping to hold the door closed. The clever part is that the pressure is normally helping the locking system rather than fighting against it. So if somebody stands up during the flight and says, I'm going to open this door, this is not something that they can simply do by pulling the handle, very hardly. The pressure difference is actually working against them.
So what is the air pressure? Well, when you're just down there, like at LaGuardia Airport, you're at sea level. The door's open, it's sea level outside, it's sea level inside.
Okay.
Now they take off. And you feel the pressure change in your ear.
Yes, exactly. You also hear it in the little baby that's behind you crying like crazy.
So that pressure change is on purpose. They could leave the cabin at sea level pressure, but they don't. Because they don't have to. Because if you left it at sea level pressure and then you go up to hardly any pressure at 30,000 feet, fuselage has to now contain this high pressure on the inside. So why force the fuselage to contain any more pressure than it has to?
Now, when an airplane is flying around 35,000 feet, the air outside is extremely thin. You will not really want the cabin to have the same pressure as the outside because people would quickly become weak, confused, and eventually unconscious. So the aircraft pumps air into the cabin and keeps the inside at a much higher pressure. But it normally does not keep it exactly equal to sea level pressure. Instead, the cabin might feel pressurized as though you're standing on a mountain of around 6,000 to 8,000 feet high, right? Depending on the aircraft and where it is during the flight. So you might wonder, why not just keep it exactly like sea level pressure? Well, because the greater the difference between the inside and the outside pressure, the harder the air is pushing to the aircraft body outward. Think of blowing up a balloon. The more air you force inside, the tighter the rubber becomes because it wants to expand. So the pressure inside is constantly trying to stretch the aircraft body. So if we insisted on perfect sea level pressure, the body might need to be much stronger and heavier as well. And once again, a heavier plane means more fuel is needed. And because the total pressure is lower, every breath contains fewer oxygen molecules. So your body might have to work a little harder, which is why some people feel tired or they get headaches during the flight. Because every time the airplane climbs, the cabin becomes pressurized. And every time it lands, that pressure is then released. So the aircraft body is slightly expanding and relaxing over and over again during its life. And that repeated stretching can slowly tire the metal, which engineers call as fatigue. This is actually also one of the reasons why aircrafts are inspected so carefully. And it's also why passenger windows have rounded corners, rather than sharp corners, because a sharp corner gives stress a place to concentrate, almost like the corner of a chip bag where, a tear can easily begin. Rounded shapes have... So even the shape of your airplane window is connected to cabin pressure.
I like it.
Now, because the pressure dropped, and because you bought your bag of potato chips at sea level,
right?
Watch what happens as you ascend and they drop the pressure of the cabin. What happens to your...
Oh, your bag kind of blows up a little bit.
It gets puffy.
A little puffy.
It gets puffy.
Yes.
Okay, so why does the chip bag puff up? Well, because the bag was sealed when the air pressure around it was much higher. As the plane climbs and the cabin pressure becomes lower, the air trapped inside the bag pushes outward more strongly than the outside pushes inward. So the bag expands. Your ear is actually dealing with a very similar problem. Behind your eardrum, you have a small pocket of air, and as cabin pressure changes, the pressure behind the eardrum and the pressure in front of it can actually become different. And your body has a very small passage that helps equalize that pressure. And when that opens, you hear or you feel that little pop. That's why swallowing and yawning or chewing can actually help it open. And babies often cry a lot in the airplane because they don't really understand what is happening and they cannot intentionally yawn or clear their ears the way that an adult can. The same pressure effect can actually cause passengers to feel bloated during a flight because gas already trapped in the digestive system can expand as the cabin pressure decreases.
Another thing is they finally figured out how to do this. And it required computers flying the airplane. Okay. When I first took physics, I said, why don't they do this on the airplanes? This is human beings, we're flying them. All right. Once a computer can fly them, here's what you can do. You could bank a turn knowing what the radius of curvature of your turn is. That means if it's an arc, what is that radius? That goes into equation. Okay. Then there's how fast are you going? That goes into an equation. Then there's what is the bank angle of your vessel? That goes into an equation. Those three variables can conspire so that you in the plane will not know you're turning.
Oh, cool.
Now, pilots were making smooth, balanced turns long before modern computers controlled aircraft. The computer just helps make those turns more accurate and more consistent. So here's the easiest way to imagine it. When a car turns sharply, you feel yourself thrown towards the side of the car, right? And that happens because the car is turning underneath you while your body wants to keep moving in its original direction. But an airplane can tilt or bank in the turn. By tilting, it arranges the forces so that they cancel out each other. Now, if the pilot or the autopilot matches the tilt, the speed, and the turn correctly, you don't really feel yourself being pushed sideways.
What they love showing in these disaster movies, the hole opens up and there's gale force winds, but people grabbing on and
there's always one stewardess who's holding on and there's like, give me your hand. And I'm like, no, I'm holding on.
The point is, what wind is that? That's getting people blowing sideways off the thing.
Right.
That's simply the air that's in the cabin.
Rushing out.
And you've been in heavy winds before.
Right.
Okay. What does the wind do when it hits you?
I don't know because
it goes around you.
Of course it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
The wind wants to get out the thing.
Right.
If I'm standing there and I'm holding onto the chair, it's not going to blow me sideways.
No,
it's just going to go around. It's just going to go around.
So all you need to do is this.
So most of the people getting blown out the airplane, that's not really
going to really happen.
No.
Yeah. Also, too, once it's depressurized, there's no more.
Yeah.
There's nothing else
and
to
in fact,
suck
the
you out.
more wind that goes out, the less wind that remains.
Right.
Right. It's not just some continuous thing.
Yeah.
Actually, if the opening is large and happens suddenly, then the airflow near that opening can be extremely violent, okay? Loose objects, panels, and anything close to that opening can be pulled or blown toward it. And there have been some real cases where people near an opening were partly or completely pulled outside. Now, the further you are from the hole, the less dramatic the airflow may be. It's not necessarily like the movies where, every person across the entire cabin flies horizontally through the air for like 5 or 10 minutes. But directly beside a very large opening, it can absolutely be life-threatening. And then there's the bigger problem, which is breathing. See, the oxygen percentage outside is still roughly the same, but the air pressure is so low that each breath provides far fewer oxygen molecules. That means that the brain can stop working properly very, very quickly. And the scary part about low oxygen is that you don't even realize that you're becoming confused. You might feel strangely happy or calm while your ability to think is actually disappearing. This is why when the masks drop, you put yours on immediately before helping somebody else. It's not because you're selfish, it's because if you become confused or unconscious, now you can't really help anybody else. Now, fun facts, on many airplanes, those passenger masks that drop do not really connect to giant oxygen tanks. Pulling the mask can actually start a chemical reaction inside a very small oxygen generator above the seats. And that reaction produces enough oxygen for only a limited time, just long enough for the pilots to actually descend to a much safer altitude.
So when you're within 10 miles of your airport coming in for landing, listen for the deployment of the wheels.
Of course.
Okay? There'll be a sound for it. So when that happens, the sound of the plane is twice as loud.
Yes, it is.
Then it's landing. How does it stop? Do they just put on the brakes? They have brakes.
Okay.
But if you stepped on the brakes with a 300-ton, well, however much they weigh, airplane.
Yeah. It just come off the wheels.
With the rubber. That's not how that works.
That's not good.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah, that's not good.
I know it's got a lot of wheels, but that ain't how that happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes down, take a look at the wing again. The wing gets big again because it wants lift, not to take off, but just not to fall down quickly.
Right.
And the moment it hits the runway, there are flaps that come up.
All of them, yeah.
They flip up.
Yeah.
So that's direct friction
Air
against basically air braking at that point. Oh, and I left out, they reverse the thrust on the engines.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. They don't reverse the engine, they reverse the thrust. So there's a part of the engine that slides back, and there are these vents. And if you could see the air would be pushing forward rather than backwards.
That's cool.
Okay, so those panels that you see rising from the top of the wing after landing are normally called the spoilers, not flaps. The flaps are actually the large pieces that already moved out behind the wing, right, to help the aircraft fly slowly during landing. But the spoilers do something different. They actually spoil the lift, and that is literally where the name actually comes from, right? When the wheels first touch the runway, the wings may still be producing a lot of lift. That means part of the aircraft's weight is still being supported by the air instead of pressing down on the wheels. But the wheel brakes work better when the tires are being pushed firmly against the ground. So what happens is that the spoilers actually rise and mess up the smooth airflow over the wing. Lift quickly disappears as a result of that, and the full weight of the plane settles onto the wheels. Now the brakes can grip the runway much more effectively. The spoilers also create drag, so they help slow the aircraft through the air. But getting the weight onto the wheels is also a huge part of the job. And then we have the wheel brakes, and these are extremely powerful brakes. They turn the aircraft's motion into heat. After a very hard landing or rejected takeoff, those brakes can actually become unbelievably hot. That is also one of the reasons why airports have emergency crews trained specially to deal with overheated brakes and tires. And then of course, like Neil mentioned, the engines also may use reverse thrust. And no, pilots don't really reverse the thrust to drive backward from the airport gate, right? Airports usually use a tug to push the plane back because blasting powerful jet exhaust around the terminal would not really be a good idea. It's actually a very, very terrible idea because it can damage equipment, it can throw objects around, and possibly knock people over as well.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Another thing, there's so much weight in fuel carried by the airplane that when it takes off, generally it can't land on the same runway. It would take too much. Once it's airborne, it can't come back and land. It has to dump fuel and then come and land.
Oh, wow. Oh, because it's so heavy.
It's so heavy.
Right.
It's so heavy.
Yeah, that'll screw up the landing.
You screw up the landing.
Oh, my God.
That's right. And part of your ability to stop is, well, how thick is the air that I'm stopping in?
Right.
Okay? Airports at high elevation have longer runways because it takes longer to take off because you need the lift of the air, but ain't much air.
Not a lot of air.
Not a lot of air. You got to go faster in the air to get the same lift you would have otherwise.
Right.
So at a high elevation airport, the air is actually thinner, right? There are fewer air molecules passing over the wing and entering the engines. So the aircraft has to move faster through that thin air to produce the lifting force that it needs. And because it needs more speed, it needs more runway to accelerate. The engines may also produce less power because they have less air to work with. So now you actually have two problems at the same time. The wing needs more speed and the engines may take longer to provide the same speed. And heat actually makes the situation even worse because when air becomes hot, it expands and becomes less dense. So an airport does not even have to be on top of a giant mountain to experience this problem. a very hot summer day can actually make the aircraft behave as if the airport were at a much higher elevation than it really is. Pilots sometimes call it a hot and high condition. The wing has a similar problem when the air becomes thin. Okay, this is why a plane may need a much longer takeoff run on a hot day at a high elevation airport. And also may need to carry less weight. That could mean less cargo, fewer passengers, or less fuel as well, depending on the aircraft and the trip. So when an airline says that a plane is weight restricted because of heat, they're not really saying that luggage became suddenly heavier because it was sunny outside. Okay, they're actually saying that the air became worse at holding up the airplane.
If your airspeed is what matters for takeoff, are you going to take off with the wind or against the wind?
Against the wind.
Against the wind.
Because you want the lift.
You want the maximum difference in speed between you and the air.
Right.
And if you're moving with the wind, that eats up the speed that you've been trying to give for yourself.
Right.
If the wind is going 40 miles an hour and you're going 40 miles an hour, you have zero lift because you're both moving together.
Right.
Okay. So that's what the windsock is for. That big old orange thing.
Yes.
You know what the hell that thing is?
Yeah.
At a distance, of course, they know.
Turns around.
They know from meteorological data.
So suppose the aircraft needs air flowing over the wing at 140 miles per hour. If there is no wind, the aircraft may need to travel about 140 miles per hour across the ground. But if a 20 miles per hour wind is blowing directly towards the plane, the aircraft may only need a ground speed of roughly 120 miles per hour to feel 140 miles per hour of airflow because the wind is already giving it 20. That means it can lift off at a lower ground speed and normally use less runway. Now a tailwind actually does the opposite because if the wind is blowing from behind the aircraft, right, then the plane may need to move faster across the ground before the wing feels enough air. That is why planes usually take off and land facing into the wind. Now, the windsock provides an easy visual cue. What major airports are not really depending on one pilot staring at a sock and saying, yeah, that looks about right. They actually have very heavy and sophisticated instruments measuring wind direction, wind speed, and gusts around the airport. The windsock is just simply a backup system for visual reference, especially for smaller airfields.
Yeah. The runways, they're in one direction like that. There's always another runway at an angle.
Yes.
Not at right angles.
Not at right angle.
At
it
some
looks
other
almost
angle.
like an offshoot. But
Okay.
Yeah.
So that if you look at all the possible directions wind would blow, you're pretty much covered when that happens. Okay? Yeah. And you do very well with that kind of angle orientation.
Okay.
And I forget, is it a 30 degrees? Not quite 45, but you can do the math and show you've maximized the number of situations you can successfully take off. Yeah. Little things to notice.
These are good. I like them all.
Yeah.
Now, some airports do have runways pointing in several directions because the wind does not always come from the same place. But not every airport has multiple crossed runways. Building another runway needs an enormous amount of money and land. The direction may also be limited by mountains, buildings, roads, and rules of the nearby areas. Okay, so airports study the normal wind patterns in that location and they try to orient runways so that aircrafts can usually operate without dangerous crosswind.
Last point.
Okay.
Since 1969,
planes
have been slowly getting quieter. There was no big announcement. There was no headline. There was none of that. They've just been slowly getting quieter so that now planes are flying overhead all the time.
We don't even know it.
I even remember we would be filming for Nova, now 25 years ago. We're just in the streets. And we say, we got to pause because there's a plane going over. Plane. And now you don't even know if there's a plane going overhead.
Right.
If you saw it, you would say, yeah, I guess I can hear that. But so I just a shout out to engineers who have figured out how to sort of maximize noise abatement.
Now, it actually happened through many small improvements over decades. Older jet engines pushed a relatively small amount of air backwards extremely quickly. And that very fast exhaust created a lot of noise. Modern passenger engines use a very giant fan at the front to move a much larger amount of air, but they don't really need to speed it all up very violently. Modern engines also have special materials and shapes inside of them that absorb sound and control it better. fan blades have also become much more carefully shaped. And engineers are now working on reducing a lot of noise from the landing gear, from the flaps, and all of the other parts that stick out in the air during landing. So overall, I think Neil's video does a really good job of making people notice things that they normally would, ignore. But when you look a little deeper, you start to realize that almost every part of an aircraft is actually solving several problems at once. This is really what engineering is about. It's very rarely about finding one perfect answer and solution. Rather, it's about balancing 10 different problems and finding a solution that works safely enough, reliably enough, and efficiently enough to be used 1,000 times again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.